Alright, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So today we're going to continue our lecture on from the previous lecture. This is a part 2, which is sampling techniques, right? So to recap, what have we learned last week, right? We already learned about sampling, right? We already know what is a definition of population and what is the definition for sample and the sampling process, right? Let's recap about the sampling process. Sampling process is a process of selecting a portion of a population. So sampling is very preferable if the population is very large, right? So it can be done either randomly or non-random sampling, right? We have two methods of sampling techniques. First is random sampling techniques or probabilistic sampling techniques. Another one is non-probabilistic sampling techniques. Right, so this is the sampling process. First, we need to define the population. Right, so we need to know what is our population and what is a target population, right? And then we need to establish a sampling frame if we want to do for a random sampling techniques, right? For random sampling techniques, we need to establish a sampling frame. And then after we establish the sampling frame, then we need to determine what are the sample size that we want to select, right? Let's say we have a population, we want to study monthly pocket money of our student, UiTM student. Let's say population we have 5,000. So we want to select one sample out of, let's say two sample. This is a sample number 1. This is a sample number 2. For sample number 1, we want to select N1 equal to 200. As for sample number 2, N2 equal to 200, right? So we need to determine what is our sample size, right? And then once we already determine the sample size, then we need to specify our sampling method. Since we are having a sampling frame, so the available sampling method that we can choose is a simple random sampling or systematic sampling or stratified sampling or cluster sampling. Or there is another one is a multi-stage sampling. So we have 5 options. In our syllabus, we only focus on these 5 sampling method lah. But however, there are a lot of sampling method out there that not covered in this chapter, in this subject. Right? We only focus in for these 5 method only. And then once you already specifying our sampling method, then we can begin to select the sample, begin the data collection method lah. So data collection method, there are a lot of data collection method, either in a face-to-face, questionnaire, observation, or focus group, right? And so on. Right, now let's move to the sampling techniques, right? So as I mentioned just now, there are 5 sampling techniques that we're going to focus under random sampling techniques. Or random sampling technique, other name we call as a probabilistic sampling techniques, right? Probabilistic or or random sampling techniques. So in this random sampling techniques, a complete sampling frame must be available or can be prepared from a target population. Let's recall what is the definition of sampling frame. Definition of sampling frame is a list of all member in the population consists of their information. So then we can, when we select the sampling unit, then we can go to the target sampling unit lah, right, easily. So there are 5 methods, which is a simple random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified, cluster, and multi-stage sampling methods. Like, look at the first sampling method. under random sampling techniques. First is a simple random sampling. It's just a simple random sampling. So in a simple random sampling, right, let me use another color, right, each element in the population will have an equal chance or probability of being selected as a sampling unit because all members have an equal probability value. And let's recall last lecture, as I said, if you have a sampling frame, let's say from 1 until 100, right, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 until 100, so each member have equal probability 1 over 100. This one also have 1 over 100 probability of being chosen as sampling unit, right? So now simple random sampling is most appropriate, right, most appropriate if the population is homogeneous. Homogeneous means same characteristics, right? Same characteristic, and the population is not too large, right? It must, because it must have a complete sampling frame. What happened? Okay, now procedure of simple random sampling. A procedure of simple random sampling. First, the member of population can be selected either two methods. So we have a lottery method or random number table method. So the accurate method can be either one, lottery method or random number method. But in this subject, we are focusing more on random number method. Random number method. So let's look at random number method. First, we need to list down all the unit of the population. Means that in first step, we need to have a sampling frame lah, right? So let's say the population size is 4,000 and 400 is our sample size. Let's say kita skip this one. Let's say I explain in most simplest way. Right, let's say our population is all student in UiTM Tapah, right? So we have all student in UiTM Tapah. Let's say capital N is equal to 5,000, right? So we need to have a complete sampling frame. So where to get a complete sampling frame? You can get either from HEA using their database, right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 until 5,000. So sampling frame ni mesti ada nama dia, dia punya student ID and phone number, address, program, semester part berapa, right? So you can track dia punya when we select when we select the sampling unit, then we can keep track lah. We can do a follow up, right? So now let's say we are after we are setting up our sampling frame. This is a sampling frame, right? And then we want to select, let's say 10 sample. Our sample size is equal to 10. So we need to select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we want to select out of 5,000, we want to select 10 sampling unit, right? So clear, this is a step. First step is we need to establish our sampling frame. Second step is we need to identify what is our sample size, right? The third step is we need to open up our statistical table, right? So you can get your statistical table in Google Classroom, right? So I already upload the statistical table in Google Classroom. Turn to page number 36, where table number 30, right? Table number 30 is a random number table. So let's say the first step, there are dalam random number table ni dia ada banyak block, right? So this is the first block, right? This is the first block, second block, third block, fourth block, fifth blocks, right? Dalam setiap block ni kita nampak dekat sini ada first column, second column, third, fourth and so on lah. Let me copy this one first. Let's say I ambil satu contoh lah. This is what we need. So we have here, kita ada column number 1, column number 2. This is C1, C2, C3, C4, C5. This is row number 1, row number 2, row number 3, row number 4, 5, 6, and so on lah. Right? So we have a lot of rows. Right? So now kita nampak dekat sini, each this one kita panggil block. Right? Satu block number 1, row 1, column 1, row 1, column 2. Right? Boleh faham this is a random number table. So now kita the first step is we going to choose randomly which block to start. Let's say we start on this block. Let's say kita select this block. Kita start dengan block ini. Okay. Right, kita boleh choose which block kita nak start lah. Sorry. So now by looking at the sampling frame, so kita ada the maximum number is 5,000, right? So 5,000 consists of 4 digits. 5, 0, 0, 0. 4 digits, right? So to use a random number table, we're going to employ, let's say we're going to start with 4, right? Kita akan ambil 4 digits. These 4 digits. This is the first random number, right? And then kalau dah habis this one, and then kita boleh turun ke bawah ataupun ke kanan, right? Ataupun ke kiri, suka hatilah, right? So the next sampling unit can be either 8416, the third one 8297, the fourth one 5092, and then 8339. And the next one, kita dah habis this one. Either we can continue to this step ataupun turun ke bawah lagi. 4033 9683. Boleh faham So this is how we read this random number table lah. Either kita boleh turun ke bawah ataupun ke kanan ataupun turun ke bawah macam ni. Suka hatilah. This is a random kan, ataupun kita boleh turun ke sini, and then ke sini, ke sini, ke sini, suka hati, right? Okay, kita boleh select. Now since the first sample kita nak ambil 10 saja, let's say kita buat sama-sama, right? Kita nak ambil 10 saja. Let's say I letak ke bawah ni. Right. Let's say kita dah pilih block ini, and then the first number that we're going to select is 4417. So 4417 is still within the range from 1 until 5,000. 1 until 5,000 dapat mana? From our sampling frame lah. We have the total population is 5,000 kan. So 1 until 5,000. So our first sampling unit is 4417. 4417 ni ambil kat mana? Ambil dekat sini lah. Student number 4417 ni, let's say Ahmad bin Abu. Student number 202018 apakah, and then kita ambil dia, masukkan dalam sampling unit. Alright, so then the second unit that we're going to select is 84, let's say this one, 8416, but 8416 is out of our range, kan, tak ada. So we cannot select 8416, 8297 also cannot, 5092 also cannot, 8339 also cannot. So we have 4033. So the next sampling unit is 4033. Then we're going to do this process until we satisfy all the sample size that we need. Right? Let's say kita dah ambil this one cannot. What happen if we see the same number down here? Contoh 4417 ni, kita jumpa lagi 4417 dekat sini. Right? What happen? Kita akan skip. Tak boleh ambil lah sebab kita dah ambil dia kan. So the next one 8842 tak boleh. So 3327 5027 tak boleh. Right, this one also cannot. So 4855. Right, this one kita ambil, and this one cannot because out of range. And then the next one is 609 3332, and then the next one is 4238. Right, this one we select, this one cannot. Right, so what happen kalau kita dah habis dekat sini? Bila dah habis, still tak satisfy our sample size, so we can continue either from this area ataupun start from the new block. Right, so next one is 7573 also cannot, 3396, this one cannot, 1505 06, right, this one kita select, and then we continue the next block 4698. So this is how we select a sample unit to our sample size. Alright, any questions so far? Any questions so far? So I hope you understand. So this is what we call as a simple random sampling. The process we select a sample unit to our sample. Right? Okay. Now we move to the next sampling method. So the advantage and disadvantage you can read by yourself. I already post the advantage and disadvantage on my podcast, so you can listen to my podcast. Right, now let's look at the systematic sampling method. Systematic sampling method is similar to a simple random sampling techniques. Right, so systematic sampling techniques is most appropriate if the population is homogeneous, means the same characteristics, right? So using this method, the sampling frame is not necessarily complete. So we don't need to have a full set of sampling frame, right? Because sampling frame only utilize the first random number, right? By then it's not really a fully randomized method lah. It's actually a semi random sampling techniques, right? It's not fully randomized since only the first sampling unit is selected randomly, while other sampling unit would follow the certain interval k. So we need to calculate the value of k. So in a systematic sampling techniques, we need to list down all unit of the population, and we need to decide the sample size and calculate the interval size k. So interval size k is equal to population size divided by sample size. And then we're going to select one element randomly from 1 to k in the population unit and proceed to select others element at every k interval until the required sample size is selected. So now, first step, let's say the same example, we have capital N equal to 5,000, right? 5,000. This is a same problem. We have a population is all student in UiTM, TAPA. And our sample size, let's say, equal to 500. So we want to select 500 out of 5,000. So first step is we need to find the value of k. The value of k is calculated by population size, which is 5,000 divided by 500. So this one should be equal to berapa? 10, right? Is it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, and then we need to have sampling frame. Let's say for a sampling frame, kita ambil 1 until 10 contoh. Right? 1 until 10, kita boleh choose randomly from 1 until 10 by using a random number table. Let's say kita tengok random number table. So let's say kita ambil this block hujung ni, right? So block hujung ni, kita tengok 60 is not within range 1 until 10, 24 also not. Kita tengok sampai kita jumpa yang kita nak. So yang kita kena adalah within 1 until 10. So 08. 08 ni adalah the first sampling unit that we select from a systematic sampling techniques. Right? Macam mana kita nak tahu 08 ni termasuk? Sebab k kita adalah 10 kan? Our k is equal to 10. So we can select our first sampling unit between 1 until 10. So 8 tu ada termasuk dalam 10 ni kan? So this is our sample size, sample. The first sampling unit is person number 8. And second sampling unit should be 10 plus 8, should be 18. The third sampling unit is 18 plus 10, 28. The fourth sampling unit is 38. So this is the case where you have dalam systematic sampling technique, dia kata dekat sini, we don't need to have a full sampling frame. Macam mana nak tak ada full sampling frame, kita boleh select the sample. For example, let's say you are doing a survey, right? Customer yang datang dekat McDonald's. So you are tengok yang beratur, nombor 8 yang beratur you select as a sampling unit. And then selepas nombor 8, 10 selepas nombor 8 tu, nombor ke-18 you akan select lagi. Nombor 28 you akan select lagi. Itu cara systematic sampling techniques lah. So that's why kalau kita tengok dekat sini, dia akan kita kena fulfill until 500 lah. Only the first sampling unit are random, taken randomly. The next sampling unit are taken by using k interval. Right? Okay. So next, the advantage and disadvantage of systematic sampling techniques, you can read by yourself, right? Right. You should know that what is the advantage and what is the disadvantage. Disadvantage is might introduce some bias lah, because we are the subsequent sampling unit are selecting by using k interval, right? So the advantage is most cheapest compared to simple random sampling, easy to draw a sample, and can do a faster result lah. And the next sampling method, which is a stratified sampling method. Stratified sampling method is, kalau kita tengok dekat sini, in stratified sampling method, the population is first divided into subgroup known as strata. So are you okay? First two sampling technique, okay? Systematic sampling techniques and simple random sampling techniques. Hope you clear about that. Ada soalan tak before we proceed on stratified? Stratified a bit complicated. Alright, good. So now on the stratified sampling method, so the population is divided into subgroup known as strata. Right. Within each stratum, the element have homogeneous properties. Means each group have homogeneous characteristic. Means the same characteristic for each group. Contoh macam mana? So let's say I want to focus on my population is all student in UiTM Tapa. Let's say kita ambil UiTM Tapa. So very easy to understand, right? So in UiTM Tapa we have 3 faculty, right? 3 faculty. First is FSKM, FA, Faculty Accountancy, Faculty of Applied Science, right? So first, out of 5,000, we divide the population into 3 group. 3 strata. Each stratum, so having a same characteristic. So this is taking FSKM course only. And this student taking only accountancy course only. And this student taking only applied science course only. Right? So they have same characteristics. So now, this is what we call as a stratified lah, the concept, okay? So now the procedure of stratified sampling techniques. First, we need to subdivide the population into homogeneous strata. So we already divide the population into 3 group. So we need to list down all element in each stratum. Maksudnya, each strata, we need to have a complete sampling frame. So let's say if FSKM, we have 1,000 students. Accountancy, we have 2,000 students. FSG, we have 2,000 students. So the total up equal to 5,000. Each group should have a complete sampling frame. Right? This group also need to have a complete sampling frame until 2,000, and this one also complete sampling frame. Okay, boleh faham? I repeat again, right? First, we need to go back to our sampling process, right? In our sampling process, first step is to define our population. So our population is, let's say UiTM, student at UiTM Tapa. So we have 5,000 students, right? The second step in stratified sampling techniques, we need to subdivide the population into homogeneous strata. Means that we need to divide the population into a group, right? Each group. Maksudnya dekat sini kita divide the group the population into FSKM, accountancy, and FSG. In FSKM, we have 1,000 students. In accountancy, we have 2,000 students. FSG, we have 2,000 students. Each group should have a complete sampling frame. So we need to have a complete sampling frame for FSKM, sampling frame for accountancy, sampling frame for FSG. Right? So step number 3, select sample randomly from each stratum, either using proportionate allocation or disproportionate allocation. But in this subject, we only focus on proportionate allocation. Disproportionate allocation nanti kita akan tengok when you have time lah. Okay. So now, So how to select, how to choose? Let's say the whole population, guna pen color, pink color. Alright. So I have a population. Let's say I put in table. Right. Senang nak nampak dalam table. Right. So let's say we have faculties. Right. We have FSKM, FA, FSG. This is a sample, right? Sample for each faculty. So we have 1,000, 2,000, 2,000. The total population should be equal to 5,000. So listen carefully. This is very important part. Right, let's say we want to select, this is a capital N, capital N, sorry. Capital N. So each, let's say you want to select N out of 5,000, you want to select only 1,000. Your sample size is equal to 1,000. You want to select only 1,000 out of 5,000. So to calculate the sample size for each faculty, so 1,000 divided by 5,000 multiply with 1,000. This is going to be your sample size for each faculty. Boleh? So what is the value? It should be berapa? Hey manusia, berapa ni?
200, sir.
200. Yes, 200. So FSKM, you're going to select out of 1,000, you're going to select only 200 respondent. So for faculty accountancy, 2,000 divided by 5,000 multiply with 1,000. So you're going to select berapa?
400.
Right? It should be equal to 400. And then for FSG also same, 2,000 divided by 5,000 multiply with 2,000 is equal to 400. So your sample size here should be equal to berapa? 1,000 lah. The total here should be equal to 1,000. Okay? So now for each group, let's say FSKM, you have 1,000 sampling unit. Sampling frame. You have 1,000. So this is a sampling frame, right? So you want to select only 200. 1 until 200. So the process of selecting 200 respondent, 200 sampling unit out of 1,000, you are using simple random sampling method. By using simple random sampling method, select 200 sampling unit out of 1,000 members in the population. Same goes to faculty accountancy and faculty applied science. Boleh faham? Okay? Alright, good. So once you understand, then it should be very good. So I can skip this one and go to straight to advantage and disadvantage. Advantage and disadvantage you can read by yourself. Advantage represent a population since each stratum are representative. So it can also be done on element within the same strata. Disadvantage is the list of stratified may be not available. They can be costly to prepare. right? Require accurate information on the proportion each stratum, right? So now let's look at cluster sampling. Cluster sampling, right? This is same as stratified sampling method. Let's look at the cluster sampling. In cluster sampling, the population is divided into subgroup known as cluster. Right. Tadi stratified sampling, we divide a subgroup in the population known as strata. For cluster sampling, we divide into subgroup known as cluster. Right. Sama juga konsep dia. Daripada whole population, we divide into a group. Right. Cuma nama group dekat sini kita panggil cluster, dekat stratified we call as strata. Within each cluster, the element have heterogeneous properties. Maksudnya, dalam satu group tu, karakteristik mungkin tak sama. Karakteristik mungkin tak sama. Let's say, you have, I want to collect a data on knowledge, attitude and practice on dengue fever prevention at Perak Tengah District. So, at Perak Tengah District, we have sub-district kan. Let's say, sub-district kita ada dekat, let's say, kita ada Belanja, kita ada Sri Iskandar, kita ada Tronoh, right? Kita ada Bota, right? So, dia sub-district. In dalam sub-district tu mungkin ada karakteristik yang tak sama. Maybe we have old people and young people, right? So, kita ada orang yang bekerja, yang tak bekerja, right? So, there are a lot of mixed karakteristik dalam tu, right? Maybe the education is different, right? So, maybe some people have a higher education, maybe some people not going, tak pergi sekolah langsung, right? So, heterogeneous means tak sama lah, karakteristik dia tak sama. So, but the element in different cluster have a similar properties. Similar properties and dalam elemen tu maksudnya setiap group tu mesti stay dalam cluster, dalam population yang kita nak cari. Right? So, what is the difference between cluster and stratified? Cluster, kita divide into subgroup. Stratified, we also divide into subgroup. What is the difference? Difference is, dalam stratified, each group must have a homogeneous properties. But for cluster, it has a heterogeneous properties. Maksudnya properties karakteristik tak sama. And the best way to select either to choose when to choose either cluster or stratified sampling method, when looking at the population size. When you have a large population, right, you always choose cluster sampling techniques. When you have a small population size, choose stratified sampling techniques. Right. Now, the procedure of selecting cluster sampling techniques. First, we need to subdivide the population into cluster, and then select the cluster randomly. Take census from each selected cluster. For example, right? Let me show. Use color apa nak guna? Hijau. So let's say Perak Tengah District. Right. So let's say in Perak Tengah District, I divide into a cluster. Contoh, this is a first cluster in Bota, second cluster in Seri Iskandar, third cluster in Belanja, right? And then so on lah. I say I divide into 3 cluster. Yang ni I boleh ingat pun, right? So let's say in each cluster ni we have a sample, sample size. Sorry, the population size for each cluster. Let's say this is 50,000 people in Bota, N2 is 100,000 people, N3 we have let's say 50,000 people. Contoh, right? So second step is we select each cluster randomly. By using a simple random sampling, we select one cluster out of 3 cluster. Contoh, let's say we select cluster from Sri Iskandar, right? So step number 3 is we take census from each selected cluster. What is the definition of census? Speak up, speak up.
A survey that takes all members in a defined population.
Yes, it takes all member in defined population, right? It takes all member in defined population. So means that, let's say we select cluster number 2, means that we're going to select all members in cluster number 2. Okay? That's the meaning of a census lah. So this is the process of cluster sampling techniques, right? Now let's look at the multi-stage sampling techniques. So sebab dia cluster, kita akan tengok multi-stage. Benda yang sama juga. Multi-stage is very useful if the study involves geographical divisions. As illustration, suppose that we want to study about the average monthly income at Petronas pump station throughout Peninsular Malaysia. We know that Peninsular Malaysia can be divided into geographical division into 14 states. These states are cluster. Select the state randomly selected, and then let's say 6 states kita select. The 6 states selected are subdivided into district. Then the district randomly selected. And then we select district further divide into town or cities and so on lah, until we will do a census. Now let's say kita nampak balik Perak Tengah district ni example. So dalam Perak Tengah district ni, let's say we divide the population into cluster, let's say into 3 cluster. Listen carefully. So let's say Bota, Sri Iskandar and Belanja contoh, right? This is what I'm trying to say to explain here is about multi-stage sampling techniques. Okay. Okay, turun bawah sikit, kita nampak kat tempat dia. Okay. Okay, multi-stage sampling techniques. First, we have a whole population. We divide the population into a cluster, into 3 cluster, right? For each cluster, let's say kita ada Bota, Sri Iskandar and Belanja. Let's say dalam Bota ni we have several village, right? So village number 1, village number 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say this one pun kita divide lah. Contoh, for example, for the sake of knowledge lah. Right? Say village 4 sajalah. Ada 4 village. Contoh. Oops. This is village 4. And let's say this one kita ada 3 village saja. 1, 2, and 3. Right? And each village will have its own population member. Let's say this is 10,000. This is V2 is 10,000. V3 10,000. V4 10,000. V5 10,000. This is N, V5, and V4, and V5. Right? And so on lah. Ada banyak-banyak kan? So, cluster tadi, remember, cluster tadi apa kita buat? We divide the population into subgroup, and then we select randomly one cluster, and we take census for that cluster lah. Kita ambil semua member dalam cluster tu. But for multi-stage, let's say we select, we divide into cluster, we select randomly one cluster. Let's say we select cluster this cluster, right? Dalam cluster ni kita ada sub village, right? So we choose randomly and select one or two village, right? Let's say we select only one village dekat sini, right? So dalam village ni, let's say kalau kita nak narrow down lagi, kita divide into, let's say, street, right? Contoh dia punya jalan, right? Pun boleh juga, right? And then we select based on street. Let's say kita select this one one step dulu. So let's say we select a village number 2 and we take census on village 2. Let's say n equal to 20k. Kita ambil semua orang dalam 20k. Ataupun kalau you nak narrow down lagi, pun boleh juga kepada based on street. Street 1, street 2, street 3. We select one street and do census. This is what we call a multi-stage lah. Dia boleh turun lagi. And then at last, we're going to take a census. Boleh faham? Do you understand?
Boleh, sir. Boleh.
Alright, good. So, make sure you can answer all the question nanti, right? Since you understand. So, the difference between cluster and stratified tadi I dah explain, right? And advantage and disadvantage pun kita boleh baca sendirilah. And then, okay. Before we go to non-random sampling techniques, can we take 5-minute rest? Kita akan balik sini 1 minit. Alright? 5-minute rest. Alright, continue. Just now we already look at random sampling techniques, right? So this part we look at into a non-random sampling techniques. Non-random sampling technique also known as non-probabilistic sampling techniques. Non-probabilistic sampling techniques, right? So in non-probabilistic sampling techniques, right, complete sampling frame is not needed. Right, we don't need to have a complete sampling frame because complete sampling frame is only is a requirement for random sampling techniques lah. So the sample can be selected either at convenience or from prior experience of the researcher. Right, some method of non-random sampling techniques are that we're going to discuss here is a convenient sampling, judgment sampling, quarter sampling, and another one is snowball sampling. Right. Convenient sampling is referred to the selection of sample that can be obtained easily and conveniently. For example, let's say you want to select a sample. Let's say you're designing a questionnaire about the food preference, right? Food preference, and then you go to the cafe, UiTM cafe, right? You see all the students are eating there. Then you distribute the questionnaire randomly. Suka-suka hati you distribute the questionnaire. So in this case, you are not distributing randomly, right? You are distributing the questionnaire at your convenience. So this case is not a random sampling technique. Jangan confuse dengan random sampling techniques. So most of the my past student confuse about the convenient sampling techniques and simple random sampling techniques. Simple random sampling techniques, you need to have a complete sampling frame and you select the sample from sampling frame. But for convenient sampling techniques, when you distribute the questionnaire, right, at your convenience, it's not random. It's at your convenience lah. It's a non-random lah, right? You don't have any sampling frame to select the sampling unit, right? So you just distribute at your convenience. So in this method, we select a sample where suitability is the primary consideration, right? Kalau you masuk dalam bus, let's say you distribute the questionnaire for the passenger in the bus, itu dipanggil convenient sampling techniques, at your convenience. So this method is commonly used in exploratory research to generate the hypothesis and to test the pilot questionnaire, right? So most of the statistical method, right? Most of the statistical method, such as a parametric test, for example, linear regression, ANOVA, t-test, require a random sample. Means that it requires the sample to be taken randomly. So if you are using a convenience sampling technique, you cannot use most of the statistical techniques or machine learning techniques. Right. Advantage and disadvantage of convenience sampling techniques does not require a sampling frame. Right. Very widely used in study because it's convenience and easy and inexpensive. Let's say kalau you buat satu Google Form, right? Google Form, questionnaire dalam Google Form, and then you post dalam Facebook or Twitter, Instagram, and so on at your convenience, and then you minta semua orang jawab, right? That one is not random. It's just at your convenience. Boleh faham, eh? So disadvantage, it introduce bias in researcher classification of sample, right? So the selection, sample selection is going to be biased lah, right? And the result maybe leads to the incorrect conclusion, right? It will not represent the whole population, right? So another method is judgment sampling. Judgment sampling is interviewer exercise his or her judgment and prior experience, right? Prior experience. For example, let's say you want to ask about example paling simple lah, senang nak faham by judgment lah, is maybe not correct, but example yang I bagi very simple, maybe not correct. Maybe kita nak tengok questionnaire pengalaman orang isap rokok, right? Kita tengok orang ni, kita based on our judgment, mungkin dia tak isap rokok, kita tak bagi questionnaire dekat dia, right? For example, right, we want to ask about the taste of cigarette ke, kita kena bagi kepada orang yang kenal lah, yang isap rokok, based on our judgment or based on our prior experience. So advantage is cost is moderate, right? Sample guaranteed to meet the specific objective. Disadvantage is also introduce a bias lah, right? Selection bias. Quarter sampling techniques. Quarter sampling techniques, the researcher select a predetermined number of individual from a different class of population, usually different occupation, age, gender, class, sex class, and so on. Right, so contoh macam you want to select 100 sample, so you distribute your questionnaire at your convenience using a convenience sampling techniques, but you have a certain criteria. You want to select only 50 males and 50 female. Once you complete all 50 female, then you tak ambil dah, cari dah female. You cari male pula, right? So you distribute the questionnaire at your convenience using a convenience sampling techniques. The primary advantage of quarter sampling, it does not require sampling frame lah. As we know, in a random sampling non-random sampling technique does not require sampling frame. And the major disadvantage is introduced bias, right? Same as previous, convenience, judgment is always introduced bias. This is a non-random sampling techniques. Another one is we call as a snowball sampling techniques. Snowball, which is not written in this manual. Snowball, snowball sampling techniques. Snowball means that based on reference, right? So let's say you approach one question observation, your sample. Satu orang respondent you approach, right? So based on dia dah jawab questionnaire tu, then you ask him or her yang mana kenalan dia lagi. So dia akan introduce dekat you, the next respondent. Then the next respondent pun akan introduce lagi kepada the next respondent. Dia pun akan introduce lagi kepada next respondent until you satisfy your sample size. Right? So this is a snowball sampling techniques. Right? Okay? So that is the method of sampling technique for random sampling techniques and non-random sampling techniques. We already discussed. To recap, right? We start with the recap. We start with the sampling process. First, sampling process. First, what we need to do is to define our population. Once you already define our population, we need to what? Have a sampling frame. After we have a sampling frame, we need to set our sample size. When we already have a sample size, we need to select a sampling method that we want to employ, whether in a random sampling method or non-random sampling method. And then the last step is we begin data collection. We begin selecting the data. So recap on sampling method. So in sampling method, we have two types of sampling method, random sampling method and non-random sampling method. Under random sampling method, we have a simple random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified sampling, cluster, and multi-stage. Under non-random sampling method, we have convenience sampling method, judgment sampling method, quarter sampling method, snowball sampling method, and we have a lot more, right, that we are not discussing in this subject, which is purposive lah, dia ada macam-macam lagi, right? Tapi kita need to know these four type of sampling method yang important yang kita discuss dalam subjek ni saja. Right. Now, for the last stage of sampling process is a data collection techniques, right? So after we already select the member, we already determine the sampling unit, we need to go for a data collection. So there are four major methods in data collection techniques. So the first data collection method is personal interviews, telephone interview, questionnaire, and observation. So personal interview is a data collection techniques which interviewer asking question to one or more respondent in face-to-face situation. Let's say we have a focus group, lies under personal interview. We go for personal interview juga pun lies under same situation lah, face-to-face question and answer. Telephone interview, this nowadays still ada lagi, but very limited. So techniques which interviewer asking question to one or more respondent through telephone. So this one can lies under online meeting, right? Pun boleh, ataupun Skype ke, you guna current technologies and not limited to telephone lah. As long as you are using something yang teknologi untuk connect people from a distant way kan. So itu lies under telephone interview jugalah. Questionnaire is a technique in which information is obtained from a respondent based on question. So you already have a questionnaire. You either mail to the respondent ataupun you meet the respondent, ask the respondent to fill up the questionnaire, or you just give Google form kan, atau Survey Monkey, you receive macam-macam platform yang sekarang ada, you bagi kepada respondent untuk isi. So this is what we call as questionnaire data collection method. Right, observation is a technique where which the trained observer or interviewer are assigned at the strategic location to observe and record respondent behavior, action, event at the time of the occurrence. So ini banyak dalam lab, right? Lab kita observe the mice, observe the plant, observe some disease mutation and so on. And ada juga dalam social science, right? Di mana kita tengok behavior of the ethnic group, right? Kita join the group as an observation, right? Ataupun macam I punya study about knowledge, attitude and practice on dengue fever prevention. First two question I asked about knowledge and practice, and the third knowledge and attitude, and practice I buat observation. I tengok sekeliling rumah, adakah rumah dia okey ke tak okey, ikut dia punya bersih ke tak bersih, right? So we do observation. So that one also a data collection method. So advantage and disadvantage of this data collection method you can read by yourself nanti, right? Nanti once you got the book, then you can baca lah what is the advantage and disadvantage. You need to understand for advantage of personal interview, high response rate. Response rate very high, right, for personal interviews. And disadvantage is very costly and time consuming lah. This is one of the advantage. For telephone interviews, right, faster results since there are no travel time between consecutive interviews, right, very fast to get the result, right. A disadvantage inability to present visual aid to the respondent lah. Nowadays we can do that, right? We can share screen, we can send a photo through WhatsApp, through WeChat, through Telegram and so on, right? And then advantage and disadvantage of mail questionnaire. This is kind of outdated lah, but currently still on practice. Ada juga yang buat. It's cheaper than personal interview and telephone interview, but basically cheaper than personal interview lah, not telephone interview, right? So response rate very low, right? When you send to the respondent, and maybe respondent just ignore the questionnaire or take longer time to gather the data, right? And observation, this is an advantage. Observation avoids interviewer and interviewee bias, right? So it's produce greater accuracy data than direct questioning lah. You can see the actual situation there, kan? And disadvantage is observation fail to record an important aspect of consumer action while expect human behavior and so on lah. This is a disadvantage, right? So I think that's all for sampling techniques and data collection method, right?